Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence of the Jaguars are being hyped a lot in fantasy football. We'll tell you if they live up to it here as we look at third-year breakouts, as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We are Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. As usual, I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Magdziuk. I'm a researcher for NFL Network and a fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
Yeah, and we're here to bring you a great show today. We're looking at third-year breakout players, Michelle. So exciting. There are a lot of good choices to pick from here as we look at the best players on the board. They're going into their third NFL seasons and just maybe looking at some guys that could be disappointing. And we'll break those guys down for you. We'll start with the running backs. We'll get into then the wide receivers and then look at the quarterbacks and tight ends and kind of look at where they're going, ranking ADP, and how you should handle them in your fantasy football draft. So, Michelle, let's dive right into it here, and we'll look at a group of three that have a lot of intrigue here in fantasy football. Travis Etienne, a very good season in the second half, pretty much taking over there as a lead back in Jacksonville, but maybe a higher ceiling here. He's now at RB12, and his ADP is 32nd overall. You have Javonte Williams listed at RB29. He right now on track to recover from that knee injury, hopefully, that wiped out a lot of his season last year before he did anything. So he's at 76 overall in ADP. And then you have Khalil Herbert of the Bears lingering in between Donta Foreman and Roschon Johnson at 37 RB, and then 106 6th overall right now. His numbers kind of fluctuate a little bit. So, Michelle, looking at Etienne, Williams, and Herbert, break those guys down for you. Obviously, Etienne is the one that stands out here.
Yeah, I mean, he had a semi-breakout last year, so people might think he shouldn't be on this list, right? Like, we're not talking about Najee Harris or Ramondre Stevenson in the same draft class because they already had their huge breakout. But Etienne just hasn't put together, well, he missed his rookie season. And then in his second year, it was like the James Robinson show at first to start with the Jaguars, which made no sense. And then he finally gets to take over this backfield, has some monster games. I mean, that middle of the season was beautiful. Then he dealt with a foot sprain in week 12, and it kind of went downhill from there. So I do think he has potential to break out even further. I mean, we saw the talent. He had so many long runs last year, a 48-yarder, 49, 49, 62. Like, he was just consistently breaking off huge runs. And I do think he has more opportunity for scoring touchdowns to getting targets. I thought he was going to get way more targets last year. That didn't come to fruition, but hopefully this year they utilize him more in that area. I know a lot of people are scared of Tank Bigsby being there. They drafted him in the third round. Does he scare you off of Etienne at all?
He doesn't scare me, but we have to just cap his touchdowns a little bit. And keep in mind the numbers might come from a different source. Now, if you're looking for him becoming Christian McCaffrey or Austin Eckler, just scoring a bunch of touchdowns and being a receiving forward back, that might be hard to expect, right? There are a lot of weapons in this passing game and running game where you look at the options, and Trevor Lawrence also was a good scorer at times when he ran the ball. So when you have to think about all that, I don't know if they're going to just say we're going to pound Travis Etienne at the goal line. He doesn't seem to be that type of back. So they also want to preserve him, right? This is a team that's looking longer term. He's a key weapon there in the passing game. So the key is the touchdowns he scored last year. Is he going to make up for it with receptions? He totally could, right? I mean, this is a hard thing to navigate. Where do all the balls go, right? Between Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and Zay Jones and everyone that's half there's only one ball. So you wonder how much Etienne can get involved. So I feel like this is a little bit of a Josh Jacobs situation going on from last year where we're hearing about a lot of people cutting into his role, except it's the other way, right? With Josh Jacobs. So these guys are going to be in the passing game. We're hearing Tank Bigsby and D'Ernest Johnson. Or are they going to get the leverage power touches, so to speak, in this offense? So I think I like Etienne. I think I like him right now. I didn't like him before when things were going up and up here, but I do say, look, I'd rather take him as an RB2, right? I feel a little bit more comfortable than say he's going to finish in the top 12. And that's where I'm at right now. I'm not saying he's not special, but I just think I'm a little bit more comfortable if I take him as an RB2 versus in the top 12.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. I think he offers really nice upside in your RB2 spot where maybe you have a guy that's safer in your RB1 spot, but Travis Etienne in any given week can score 20 plus points he has that in his wheelhouse pretty easily. Let's move on to Javonte Williams here because he's a guy I was completely off to start the offseason. I didn't think he was going to come back from his injury this quickly, but it seems like he has no limitations in Broncos training camp. I mean, Sean Payton is there now. We're expecting this offense to be better with Russell Wilson. He's still going super late. It seems like people are still scared about his injury and the production he hasn't put up so far in his career. How are you feeling about Javonte Williams at his ADP right now of 29? You can get him in the 7th, 8th round.
I think I'd be a little bit aggressive in getting Javonte Williams, knowing that there's something that I can be comfortable with that Breece Hall doesn't have, a surefire handcuff, right? I can go after Samaje Perine. It was clear that they added him to be the backup, and he's shown that, right? He can be very productive. He did that behind Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. So you're going to maybe have to pay a little bit of a premium, but I do want this Broncos backfield. I feel like you're right with Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi. They're going to really help the running back, and there's some parallels, right, to Alvin Kamara, to Austin Eckler. Javonte Williams can be a very good receiver here. So that could be the way they work him in most to kind of settle Russell Wilson in this offense is get him involved with those shorter passes, maybe not give him that same pounding, bring in Perine there. So I think there's ways to preserve him. I think Perine at this stage is a better kind of complimentary back than Melvin Gordon was to him because I think you saw last year he can do a lot of little things, but I tend to look at Perine's role and say, look, there are a lot of things he can do that mirror Javonte Williams. So that would say, much like the Joe Mixon role, that he's going to be straight up backup, get a few relief touches, but they're confident in Javonte Williams now. I'm laughing because they're always like tied to, will they sign Dalvin Cook or one of these other backs? But I think they're in good shape here with Williams and Perine. So if I am going after Williams, I'm going to be aggressive, knowing that people are a little bit off this a little bit. I want to take advantage of his value, but also don't forget about him and say, look, I'm going to let him sit there because somebody else could be thinking the way we are as well in your leagues and want to jump on Williams. But you get Williams, you get Perine, then you're good, right? I think that's what you have to approach it like. And I think it's Broncos running game and the backfield pass catching are going to be valuable no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. And then my favorite value, I've talked about him earlier last week. I think he is a real serious third-year breakout player. It's Khalil Herbert of the Bears. You're able to get him in the 9th round. So a super late running that back that can be a starter for his team and get a ton of touches on a team that's going to be running the ball so much. So I clearly am all in on Khalil Herbert. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, I'm not buying Donta Foreman. I've heard all these reports that he's like the lead back, but it's flexible, right? Donta Foreman is not necessarily Mr. Durable, right? He's had a couple of good super stub stints there with the Titans and Panthers, but he's not a guy that's known for holding up. I mean, he had a major injury early when he got in the league out of Texas, so I just don't trust him to fully stay healthy. I'm just wondering how much they want to give Khalil Herbert. I think the one concern is kind of the Josh Allen feeling in Buffalo. Justin Fields is a rushing hog here. Yeah. So I'm not sure what you're going to get. I think what you need from Herbert is him to be dedicated as a receiver as much as possible. Roschon Johnson, who they got, another running back out of Texas, complimented Bijan. He's a power back. I mean, that's the way he's built here. So they don't really have someone with the profile of Herbert to catch passes. So that's going to be the key for him. Can he get involved enough in the passing game and score a few times here to really pay off? But right now, as a flex position player, yeah, I'm going after him. I'd much rather target him with the upside versus Foreman in any format.
Yeah, I think the Bears running back, the lead running back in this clubhouse, whoever it may be, is going to be a steal in fantasy drafts this year. And my bet is on Herbert. He had 4 games, 12 plus carries last year, average over 18 fantasy points per game in those games. So like he's shown when he gets to work is he's super talented. And I'm betting on him to get the work this year. There are some deeper running backs that maybe have a chance to break out in their third year. You're looking at Elijah Mitchell of the 49ers. He can't seem to ever stay healthy. He's already actually hurt right now and missing practice. Then you have Kenneth Walker out of the Eagles. You can get him in your last round or, off waivers later on in the year, but he's getting a lot of hype as the third down running back right now. And then Kenny Nwagwu, if I said that last name, I may have butchered it, my bad, of the Vikings. He's been really just like a return guy so far in his career, but maybe with Dalvin Cook gone, does he get more work? Do any of these guys interest you with your last pick in the draft?
Well, I would have been interested more with Gainwell with the Eagles, but I don't like this backfield direction right now with Boston Scott returning behind Rashad Penny, DeAndre Swift. I can't see a path to touches that makes me comfortable with Gainwell, except for the occasional looks inside the red zone. You look at Nwangwu, he's been very good in special teams, and that's why they drafted him. You thought maybe an opportunity might open. Ty Chandler hasn't been all that impressive yet behind Alexander Mattison with no Dalvin Cook, but I don't know if they want to extend him that much, especially when they're looking at Madison potentially as a workhorse. But I'm most interested in Elijah Mitchell, and I'm most interested if I'm a Christian McCaffrey manager, right? I want to make sure I've sewed up Christian McCaffrey. It doesn't really matter if Mitchell's banged up right now. He just has to be somewhat healthy, to me, at some point when McCaffrey breaks down. And you just want to be able to pivot and you plug in Mitchell, he's going to give you RB2 plus production immediately, right? If McCaffrey were to go down. So again, another very valuable handcuff you have to go after. I think he's one of the better ones, obviously, to target. So as a handcuff, I love Mitchell. I think I might also look at him as a lottery ticket if the McCaffrey manager is trying to get Mitchell or lets him slide a little bit to where he's going an RB42 in that 130, 140 range. If he's sliding a little bit, then jump on him because, again, you're McCaffrey injury away from having the big advantage of the 49ers running game. So let's watch that injury, make sure he stays as the number 2, has some durability there. But if he is, then he's one of the best handcuffs in fantasy.
Yeah, and there is a chance that he doesn't even make the team this year, and it has nothing to do with talent. The dude just can't stay healthy one touch. So the team might have to move on. We'll see how long this injury lasts and if he makes a team. But if he does, yeah, you're right. He's fantastic when he's actually on the field. All right. In our next segment, we're going to get into potential third-year breakouts, starting with Chiefs wide receiver Kadarius Toney. But first, we need to have a little chat. August is here, and you know what that means. The official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home leagues by trying out Best Ball and Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. It's personally my favorite way to mock draft and prepare for my home leagues, as everyone has a stake in the team that they draft, and you get real, accurate ADP of where players are being drafted. You can try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger, with $15 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. All right, Vinny, let's hop into these potential third-year breakout wide receivers. This is the issue, right? When we're looking at this class, we're looking at the 2021 wide receiver draft class that's already given us Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Are we being greedy, asking for more? Maybe. But there's still a handful of guys that are good candidates to break out in their third year from this class. You have Kadarius Toney of the Chiefs, Elijah Moore with the Browns now, Rashad Bateman of the Ravens, Rondale Moore, the Cardinals, Nico Collins with the Texans. You can get all these guys in the double-digit rounds of your fantasy drafts. Let's go through them all and say, do you buy or sell that they're going to break out this year? Let's start at Kadarius Toney. Vinny, how you feeling about this injury-prone player?
I'm not sure. I mean, I do like Toney's potential. Like, it looks like there can be an opportunity for him to deliver here with Patrick Mahomes. I mean, they made the cheap trade for him because they saw some of the Tyreek Hill speed, quickness qualities in him. So there's that on his side. But the Chiefs also are not sentimental, right? They got a good year out of Juju Smith-Schuster. Then they moved on. They also have a lot of weapons. We know they have to spread the ball around, and Patrick Mahomes is really comfortable doing that. You look at Sky Moore, that could also be a factor here, working the slot. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a big play guy. So some of the things that Toney can do, those guys can do by committee. You have also Rashee Rice really impressing right now. So I'm not sure exactly what you're going to get from Toney. Again, staying on the field is a big issue for him. So I like him, but I want to take a lesser chance on him. I don't want to take him inside the top 50 at wide receiver. I want to wait a little bit if I can. If someone else takes him, that's fine. I'm not going to cry about it, and we move on there. But I think elsewhere, Rondale Moore kind of intrigues me. Elijah Moore, I'm just a little bit worried between Amari Cooper, David Njoku, Donovan Peoples-Jones with a new team, how much he's going to get attention. Rashad Bateman, a total crowd there with the Ravens, and he's got the issue. But with Rondale Moore, I just think where are the Cardinals' targets going to go? We talked about Trey McBride here, no DeAndre Hopkins. I get Marquise Brown, should get a lot of targets, but they also can end up starting Clayton Tune, a young quarterback here in week one. It actually could happen the way it's going here. So you might want to go with the shorter passes, dump it off to Rondale Moore. I think they need someone to help James Conner in the short passing game there. I don't think they want to trust Conner too much with that. So I think Moore could rack up a bunch of targets. I would lean to him more in PPR leagues.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I was looking at one of the guys that excites me, if I want to say if any of these guys do, I say it's Rondale Moore over Toney. I guess I would say that, and more Elijah Moore and Bateman off my radar.
So, yeah, I'm with you with Rondale Moore here. In full PPRs, I'm actually really okay taking a shot on him. His average depth of target has been so low throughout his career, and it was super, super low in college at Purdue. So there's no reason to believe that's going to increase. But like you said, without Kyler Murray, these backup quarterbacks aren't going to be slinging it down the field. So he could get a lot of targets, a lot of receptions, maybe not a lot of yards or touchdowns, but in PPR, and you're grabbing him at 164th overall, he's going to be valuable in there. But the reason why I might not have too much Rondale Moore is he's not going too much further back than Elijah Moore at this moment. And I do see, this is my thing. When Elijah Moore was coming out of school, I was in love. I thought he was so incredibly talented. And then he did nothing for the Jets, but he's getting all this hype again in the preseason, and he's getting comfortable with Deshaun Watson. What if Deshaun Watson does get back to his old playing days? Then don't you think Elijah Moore is a steal at his cost? Like if Deshaun Watson plays like he did in Houston, and I do believe Elijah Moore has the talent, he seems like an absolute steal where you can get him in the 12th, 13th round.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Moore and Bateman. Part of it is I really thought both of them were going to be really good last year and their workout. Elijah Moore quickly faded, and he got into some issues with the offense, and they had to move him. And Garrett Wilson clearly separated as their clear number one, and that hurt him. And then Bateman now has got to deal with Odell Beckham Jr. and all of these other guys, Nelson Aguilar, and now looking at Zay Flowers in the draft. So when you look at these situations, I'm not sure I can count on the targets, right? That's what I'm looking at. Am I going to get enough targets here to pay off with Elijah Moore? Now, he may make several shot plays, but don't forget about Peoples-Jones. I thought he was really good there for them in a lot of games where Amari Cooper disappeared. He was there, and Njoku is a big part of what they do. So I think I'm just a little bit worried about the opportunity. I agree with you on Elijah Moore having talent, Bateman as well, having high-level talent. I think overall they're better receivers than maybe Rondale Moore and Kadarius Toney. But at this point, I'm weighing the talent, but I'm also weighing the opportunity, and that's where I kind of stand with those guys. And I don't know, maybe Nico Collins is someone we're overlooking. I know we talked about Tank Dell, and maybe he's going to pass him up here. And you got Robert Woods and Dalton Schultz. So I don't know, Nico Collins may be an afterthought here, but again, I try to find with these deeper receivers where they're going to get the targets. And I don't know, it's just hard to invest in any of these guys, but I want to make sure that I'm not reaching to get these guys too much if I'm looking for like a wide receiver 4 or 5.
Yeah, Nico Collins is getting a lot of love in camp right now, but like you look through his first 2 seasons, he's never scored more than 15 PPR points in a game, scored more than 12 points just once. And like he's had targets, like he's had 5 games with 9 or 10 targets. So he's had games with very high target volume. He's had more than 70 receiving yards just one time. It was like barely more than that.
It's
he had
hard.
10 targets in one game last year where he had 5 receptions for 49 yards. Like it's not doing it for me. And like I am on board with Tank Dell or even John Mechie being the number one in this offense. He does have quite a bit of competition all of a sudden, it feels like. So I'm not going to take a chance on Nico Collins, but I get the excitement on him.
Yeah, and beware about new offenses, right? I mean, Nico Collins was in a different type of offense. Now the 49ers style of offense. I mean, same thing with Rondell Moore, so that might change his usage for the better. Bateman is a new offense. Elijah Moore is a new offense, and the Kadarius Toney a change at coordinator. So maybe the one guy that's status quo. So keep in mind, new coaching staffs, new personnel leads. Don't always commit to the older guys, and that they can quickly change. And I think you make a great point with Collins. I mean, look, they invested in Robert Woods, looking at Mechie from last year, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. I mean, there's reasons that they weren't sold on Nico Collins, and that's why they're moving on. And sometimes you have to read the room with these places, and that will give you an idea of a player's usage as well. Now, we will close the show here looking at more third-year breakouts at quarterback and tight end for you. We'll talk about some big names, including Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. Again, thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day we'll have a more in-depth for you tomorrow, Michelle. So good stuff. Tell them what they can look forward to on tomorrow's show.
Yeah, we're getting into guys that can have bounce back years. The players that struggled last season that we think are going to bounce back and be a good value in drafts. So we'll go through all of those guys tomorrow.
Okay, and that sounds like a great show. And again, we're welcome you to Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. And Michelle, we're down to the quarterbacks and tight ends going to year 3. So let's talk about Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence first. Justin Fields, QB7 on the board, ADP of 47 overall. You have Trevor Lawrence right behind him at QB8, 55 overall. I guess because they're so close, Michelle, which quarterback would you rather have here, and which is going to be the better value overall?
I mean, a gazillion times out of gazillion times, I'd rather have Justin Fields than Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you get a quarterback and a running back all in one. Last year, Fields was the quarterback 5 in points per game last season, scoring 19.7 points per game. And that's with a super, super slow start to the season. Weeks 1 through 6, he was only averaging 12 points per game. Week 7 through 17, he missed week 18 with injury. He averaged 25 points per game. Only Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes averaged more during that span. Now you add in DJ Moore, and I do think he helps him make that leap like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts made in their third season once they got that reliable wide receiver to target regularly. Like, he had nobody to pass to last year, and he's already the quarterback 5. So maybe you might be like, how is he going to be a breakout? But he didn't do it for the full year. And I do think that he has the opportunity to be the quarterback 1 overall this year. My biggest thing with him is he's going right around Justin Herbert, who I have as really having an amazing year too. So it's between those two who I love the most. Are you on the same field with me with Justin Fields here?
I like what you did there. Looking at Justin Fields, I feel like it might be the ADP seems reasonable, but I'm seeing him going way early. Like, I'm seeing him go right up there with Jalen Hurts.
That's too early.
And that is a little too expensive for me. Like, I do want to invest in him, but can I get the return on investment right later? And that's why I'm looking at the Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence kind of pairing there, because everyone's hyped the top 3, right? With Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts, justifiably so. Then you kind of have a second 3, so to speak, with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Justin Fields in some order. But I think it really depends on your league, because I think that middle 3 is going to go in different ways in basically every different league that you're in. So keep that in mind. If Justin Fields is a little too rich for you, like 4th round, would you push it? I mean, right now, that's what his ADP is right now. What are you giving up at the other positions there, right? It depends on what's available. And look, I've mentioned that I love Trevor Lawrence here. I think when I look at Lawrence, I just look at someone who can push for that number we're looking for in the pass game, the 40 TDs. And I think he's going to do enough running. I just think there's a opportunity there. And you look at the second half down the stretch of last season, and keep in mind how much Trevor Lawrence was hyped coming into this league, right? He was the can't-miss person, and unfortunately got stuck with a terrible coaching situation as a rookie, but he's living up to that physical ability. I mean, he's got a ton of it here. We know he's a good enough runner. They don't design a lot of runs for him, but he takes off and puts up those numbers when you want it, kind of like the way Joe Burrow is. So it comes down to me, do you think Lawrence can be like a Joe Burrow and get it done enough with his arm and do enough with his legs to support that and finish there with a better value than Fields. So it really comes down to that. And then on the flip side of that, do you trust Fields to throw a little bit more to bridge that gap? So I think that's the question. But to me, both are fine targets. I just am going to be wary about Fields because I feel like in a lot of leagues, he's going to be jumped on way early because of the hype.
Yeah, it all depends on your league. And really, if he's, if you're looking at the bottom of the fourth round, it's all going to depend on if another player fell that you really like, right? If you're looking at the board and you don't really love anyone there, maybe that's when you pull the trigger on taking a guy like Fields. Or I don't know, like when they're going this close in ADP, though, like I know Lawrence could be going a couple rounds later, depending on your draft. I still would rather pay up for Fields than like Fields is not, or Lawrence is not cheap either. So what he could be Joe Burrow. He could also be like a Kirk Cousins. I see him somewhere in the middle. I don't know. I think he'll be fine. I don't really want to spend as pricey of a draft pick as he's costing this year.
Yeah, I think there's not anything that you need to worry about Fields. I think with Lawrence, maybe a little bit higher risk, higher reward. We'll just say that. I mean,
Yeah.
well, that's the big difference. Is Justin Fields has the cheat code floor of his running attack, and that's going to be there. The question is, Trevor Lawrence has got to make up the numbers in a different way. So we'll see how it plays out. I think again, they're both worthy targets on your team, and it also might just say, look, there's a lot of quarterback depth. Wait a little bit to target that. Now we're going to go to tight end, and we did have actually 1,000-yard season already out of Kyle Pitts, but it seemed very quiet, right, as a rookie.
Yeah.
And
because he had one touchdown.
Yeah, he was just not targeted in the red zone. Then last year he was an afterthought. He was turned into some kind of halfway thing between blocker and just an acceptance that he was being double teamed without Calvin Ridley. There was just Arthur Smith trying to justify different ways that Kyle Pitts was not getting involved in the offense. So right now he's ranked as tight end 6, and then a little bit later as tight end 10. Pat Freiermuth seems to keep sliding down and now 90th overall. So I know we've talked about both these guys. I do like Pitts a little bit, but then again, I'm a little bit buyer beware on the Falcons offense in general. That isn't Bijan Robinson. We've also talked about that. I'd say the better value here is Freiermuth because I look at the Steelers offense. They're still going to rely upon him. And I think he's going to give you that production there. I don't know if Pitts is going to give you upside there. You might just get what you get, right, and be slotted right at tight end 6, where I think Freiermuth could at least finish a little bit above tight end 10. So that's how I look at it. I'm looking at value at tight end. And probably this and the Fields-Lawrence debate comes down to I'm a person who waits at tight end if I don't get that top guy, and I would maybe follow that through here with Freiermuth and wait for him over Pitts at this point.
Yeah, so Freiermuth, he's a hard one, right? Because he's meh in fantasy. He was the tight end 11 in fantasy points per game last year, so he's still going higher than that. And he had 98 targets last year, 63 receptions. Both were second on the Steelers. I don't see that holding up. I think Deontay's a clear-cut wide receiver 1 with George Pickens getting more targets this year. Allen Robinson's going to come in. They drafted Darnell Washington early in the draft. Connor Hayward is getting a ton of buzz here. Like, it's going to be hard to keep him off the field with how much he's doing. So I think he could steal some tight end snaps as well and targets. I think the offense in general is going to be super run heavy because they're going to rely on their defense. I don't think there's enough for Freiermuth to be anything special. So he might be okay, but super, like, he's not winning you any weeks. He has just 4 games in his career with 15 plus fantasy points over his first 2 seasons. Like, he doesn't offer upside for me, and I'm very much an upside type fantasy player, so I'm out on him. Kyle Pitts does offer the upside, right? We saw it in his rookie season, but then his yards plummeted last year, 35.6 receiving yards per game last season. He scored fewer than 5 fantasy points in PPR. Fewer than 5 fantasy points in 60% of his games played last year. How is that possible? How is that possible for a guy as talented as Kyle Pitts?
I mean, I'm just concerned again. We talk about coordinators and coaches, and I just don't think maybe Arthur Smith knows how to use Kyle Pitts. Like, he's given a gift that is just a little bit questionable. Where I don't know, like, I think Matt Canada might force more of Pat Freiermuth into the lineup. Like, he's my guy. He's going to be out there. And I know they're having an emphasis on better blocking as well. And that's something Freiermuth can still improve on. I think there's some aspects as an inline tight end that help him stay on the field a little bit more. So I'm not saying I'm going to go crazy for either of these guys. I'm not really interested in targeting either of them specifically. I kind of have mentioned that I like Darren Waller kind of in the middle tier to target among the tight ends a lot more. And even I said I would avoid Dallas Goedert, but he has some more appeal at least than Freiermuth to me. So when I look at this, look, I'm not interested in too much of Pitts. Like I'll have him on a few teams, I'm sure, but I need to have a good value here because again, I think there's a bit of a muddled middle at tight end, and I don't want to invest too much there. I kind of look at okay, if I don't get Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, T.J. Hawkinson, I might just say, okay, it's Darren Waller. I'm going after one of those sleepers we talked about in year two, like Greg Dulcich or Chigakampo, right? So I kind of want to avoid this middle in general because I just don't think you're going to get the return there in relation to the other guys in this tier, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and like when we're discussing Pat Freiermuth, like you can get Dalton Schultz later, and I think they're both not super exciting guys. For Dalton Schultz, way more targets in his offense
and better value in the draft. So you just have to consider that as well. So again, I think the bottom line is we might do Pitts if the price is right, but Pat, we might be out on unless the price is way down there. So I'm just not, again, thrilled about either of these guys. Unfortunately, they don't give us as much buzz as the quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs of this group for sure in 2023. So, Michelle, looking forward to talking to bounce back players tomorrow. So looking at those top candidates, we might talk about Dak Prescott, I have a feeling. So we'll break those down for you. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first and every day. Everydayers, thanks for checking out. We bring it to you 5 days a week, all through draft prep season, all the way through regular season, helping you dominate your drafts and your leagues. So stay with us. We'll do that for you and give you more good draft prep as we go forward to close the week. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this is Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.